Well, greetings, world, and greetings, Seven Spot. This is our very first webinar on building a low cost. And to help us with today's show, I'm going to introduce some of our guests. And from all the way from Victoria in British Columbia, we have Al G. And joining us from Burnaby, British Columbia, we have Steve Dunbar.
Hi, guys.
And all the way from Nashville, Tennessee, we have Dave Lassell.
Hey, everybody.
Now, we've got a presentation that we're going to give to you. It's recorded, and it's we've got all of these presenters, plus we have one from Randy Webb from Denver, Colorado. Now, unfortunately, he's not available to join us in the presentation. However, what I would like to ask everyone is please enjoy the presentation, and if you've got questions that you want to ask, please use the chat and say hello, identify yourself. But please, if you want to keep it anonymous, choose a name for yourself in the chat that you can keep it this way, because this will be aired at some particular point on YouTube, and we'd like to keep it all confidential as we possibly can. So stay tuned, enjoy the show, and we will talk to you after the presentation. Hi, I'm Jim from Seven Spot, and welcome to our webinar. We've been live streaming the stories of low-cost builders worldwide for some time now, and that's why we've decided to create a series of webinars that may help you with your planning and build journey. Our purpose here is not to offer you a step-by-step build manual. Although we do have lots of tips and tricks to share, our focus is twofold. One, sharing a roadmap a couple of our guys have used to help them find success, and two, sharing the experiences of a couple of builders who are now into their builds. None of our presenters are professional builders, they're just normal guys like you and me. Our first presenters, Randy Webb and Al G, will share aspects of their journey which helped them along the way. Randy has built a Haynes Roadster, and he will speak to the importance of planning, creating a build log, parts inventory, and maintenance journal. Al will share his McSorley build journey, the homework he did before his build, and will show you some of the specialized tools, tips, and tricks that he used. After Randy and Al, we want to bring you the stories of two guys who are building their Locost right now. Steve Dunbar has been building his Locost for a while, and he is closing in on the finish line. Dave Lassell is just getting started on his build journey. These stories will hopefully reinforce 2 points. One, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And two, be kind to yourself. Mistakes will happen. That's how we learn. Stick with us to the end of this recorded presentation, and then feel free to ask our presenters any questions that you may have.
So I started with plans from the Haynes Roadster book, but ended up modifying those significantly because I used MX5 running gear. So this is the plans and info book that I ended up making. Really helpful to make a parts sheet so you can go back and replace things when they do wear out. Weights, hydraulics, things like that. And then just a ton of hand drawings, photos, lists, some other plans. So I kind of put together, these are some of the drawings, a book, if you will, of the build. And so this is just an informational book that I can go back and review as I need to. And it helped along the way as well. This is what I organized mostly for registration and then for my own records, but it's basically, again, the same info sheet, some photos of VIN numbers and part numbers and things like that. And then when I went through and tabbed build material, suspension, brakes, body, electrical, all of these are essentially my receipts. So you've got essentially receipts for everything that went into the build, and it turned into this book that is a lot bigger than I'd hoped it would be at the start, because you realize how much money you spend on one of these projects. So, you know, I've heard the term low cost, not true. And then for wiring itself, I ended up doing an entire book on its own of wiring that uses the MX5 factory manual and a spreadsheet that I put together that just kind of discusses each ECU output, where it goes, color, notes, and that really helped because I essentially cut and spliced the entire thing for the MX5 side, and I divorced the chassis from the engine. So the notes were really helpful, and if I ever need to refer to it to troubleshoot or anything, these are each plug I kind of worked through, and then there's plugs for the ECUs and so on and so forth. So the entire book on its own of electrical, and I was really happy with the way that turned out. The electrical was actually one of my most daunting projects and ended up being one of my favorites during the build. So that's the books that started the whole thing. Here's the car with no nose cone, no bonnet. So I can kind of walk you through the engine detail, discuss what we've got going on in the car, and then I'll show you it all buttoned up. So it's a 1.6 liter MX5 or Miata base engine with ARP fasteners, standard pistons, rods, crank. It's got a T3 turbo. The specs on that T3 are, it's a 50 trim with a 0.48 on the turbine side AR, and then the compressor side AR is 0.42. So real small because I wanted it to be able to boost quickly, and it does. And I'm ended up right around 10 to 11 psi at full boost when it's cool out, and that's really happy. I'm really happy with the way that that feels. No lag at all. And I did port the wastegate so that I don't get any boost creep, and ended up porting the turbine as well to match the manifold. It has an electronic boost control, which is mounted right there. And it's an IAT, intake air temp, and map sensor. So it's converted from the original Miata mass airflow to speed density. It's got 440 cc fuel injectors that are actually Mazda parts that I rebuilt. The radiator is an aluminum radiator that was originally made for the Civic, and that seems to be working really well. I'll see during the heat of summer. I've only driven it a couple times in anger so far. Obviously intercooled. The manifold for the turbo is a cast iron unit, log type manifold. I ended up reliefing it, which you can kind of see in there. See those relief cuts? And that was to avoid cracking. And then I ported it as well to match the turbine porting that I did, and just cleaned it up a little bit. It has an HKS SSQV blow-off valve, just kind of buried down here. That works pretty well. Sounds cool. The whole thing's tied together with a Mega Squirt MS2 that's a plug and play for the Miata. The downpipe is 2.5 inches. I TIG welded that. It's stainless. And that goes into a MagnaFlow muffler. Has a Flying Miata clutch and flywheel setup. I have the OBP pedal assembly, which is kind of buried down there. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but that has a dual master cylinder setup and a proportion or bias bar. Using a Torsen 1.8 liter Miata differential. And I do have the K-Miata reinforcement plate on there. I did that before I got my TIG welder, but I'm happy with it, so I left it. It's kind of thick aluminum piece bolted through. And what that does is keeps this relief that's designed for if the car is in an accident, cracking the ear so that it doesn't damage everything else and run you guys into the passenger compartment. But what we want is to stiffen this because it's a known crack weak point in the diff when you start adding power to these. So that's what I've done is reinforce that area. You can also see the diff mount, the way that was designed, really, really stiff. That's really important on these. A lot of failures on some of the designs that people have used for the differential mount. This one works really well. I'm using for suspension Protex. Those are custom valved and custom sprung coilovers from the UK. And basically you fill out a sheet and tell them what specs you'd like, and they build them for you. So really nice. They're adjustable for rebound. You can see the knob there on the front lower, which is kind of cool. The brakes are 1.8 MX5 Miata brakes, and I'm using Hawk HPS pads because I'm going to plan on autocrossing it initially, and those have a good heat up pretty quickly, which is what you want for autocrossing. Now the wheels, I've gotten a lot of questions on those, and I did some research. They're original work equips. I think they're equip 3s, but they came with my donor, which was a huge score. If you want to Google how much those things cost, they're big bucks, and they're really lightweight. They're 15x7s. The front and rear wishbones are Heim jointed. You can see that, so I can adjust caster and camber and toe on the back of the toe. And unequal length A-arms in the rear with independent rear suspension, obviously quite a departure from Caterhams and 7s, except for the very latest Caterhams. The bodywork some of it came from Kit Car Direct, which is MK in the UK. So the rear boot, the rear fenders, the scuttle, the front wings, which are carbon and are really, really light. I can't even express, you pick them up and they feel like a feather. And the wide mouth nose cone, which I'll show you once we got the bodywork back buttoned up. That all came from the UK. The toughest part of that was actually the shipping cost from the UK, but really nice parts. I'm happy with those. The lights are actually Caterham units. I think they're 5 3/4 inch, if I remember right. Same with the rear. We've got rear Caterham, the older style Caterham lights. Now they've got those new trick looking LED ones. The gauges on the interior are Speed Hut, and I had those custom built. You used to be able to do more, but they still have quite a bit of custom capability. So you can basically choose your font, color, bezel style, all kinds of cool stuff, and which gauges you'd like. And then the lower gauges are AEM because that's the fuel air fuel ratio that I end up using. So my boost gauge and air fuel ratio are both AEM. Has a mounting steering wheel right there, which actually has a story behind it. It came from my classic Mini when I got a Moto Lita for my birthday one year. And I kept that. So that sat on our wall as a decoration for a long time, and I wanted to reuse it. So got the correct MX-5 Boss for a mounting steering wheel, cleaned it up a little, and found, I think it was Etsy, that had these little Super 7 decals that was the right size. And so I ended up putting that on the car. Really happy with that. I do plan to make a Boss of some sort that'll tie this together just to clean that up a little area. The switches came from Billet Automotive, or Billet Buttons rather, and they're in Australia. But I was really happy with those. And then that big billet knob there is from Quickwire, and that's the headlight switch, along with toggles for the hazards and the turn signal. So the seats were originally 914 seats that I had. I've had, I think, 5 of those 914s. I wish I had one of them still. And the headrests were cut off and then custom upholstered in a houndstooth pattern, which I really wanted in this car. And I really love houndstooth and think it looks pretty very classic, the way they worked. I also had seat heaters installed, as this car has no HVAC of any kind, no AC, no heat, nothing. So that makes it really nice. And they heat up quick, and there's actually 2 settings, so that worked out really well. The rear view mirror is just a hot rod pedestal mirror. And I think that looks really nice too. That kind of, the original mirror I got was from Speedway Motors, and it didn't fit. The angle on the windshield was wrong. So this one I think actually looks a little more classic, mounted on the scuttle anyway. So really happy with the way that turned out. And it does have a little bit of a warp look to it when you look through it. I don't know if it'll come out on the camera, but I'm going to see how that works. It's just not perfect, but still looks like it'll work pretty well for me. The rear view mirrors are a Spa Formula Car mirror that mount to the windshield stanchions. And so far so good. I've actually driven it with those in place on a closed course with a professional driver, and they work really well. So happy with that. No vibration or anything, which is what I was worried about. So then the electrical stuff, like I said, was one of my favorite parts. There's the factory Mazda engine side, and that's what controls the engine. And then I've got a quick wire harness, which you can't really see, it's up under the dash, for the chassis. So totally divorced, powered separately, everything is separate. That actually worked out really, really well. And I think the later Miatas went to that. This is originally the donor was in 1993. So shortened it quite a bit, the wiring, from the original Mazda. And I've actually got an entire crate of wiring left over that came out of the original donor car, and then as well as the shortened wiring from Quickwire. So again, that worked out really well. The battery itself is an Odyssey Extreme. I think it's a PC680. It's an AGM battery, so you can mount that any way you like. And I kind of did a modified factory mount from Miata and then made it work with the 7. So it's a little bit modified to work, and that works really well. The fuel system is a custom fuel tank that's baffled. It's just a welded up aluminum bit. It's got some baffles inside. And then I went with a Holley. You can see the number actually on it. It's a 12-130 kit, and it works great. A lot of the 7s have fuel pickup issues. So this includes the Holley Hydromat, which is kind of a big sock that sits along the bottom and sucks up every last bit of fuel. So there's almost zero unusable fuel, which is really cool. And then it's got a Holley fuel pump that's an in-tank fuel pump as well. And it's a 255 pound per hour pump, which is plenty for what I'm pushing. And then a fuel filter as well. And then the fuel, I think it was Tanks Inc. that made the fuel sender, and that works with the speed hut gauge. The speed hut gauge is customizable. It'll work with almost any fuel sender you got. All AN fittings and all stainless braided hose in black, which worked good too. Again, chassis wise, it's a Haynes, and then did the roll bar myself and bought a bender for that. Worked out the geometry, bent up the bar. I do plan to do a race cage as well. And there's some plates inside the chassis that I've already welded with a nut to retain the forward part of that cage. So I'll probably do a forward hoop and then a roll cage for the track. So that's the overview of the car. And now I'll just button it up and show it to you while it's all put together. Okay, so now it's all buttoned up. Nose cone is what Kit Car Direct and MK call the wide-to-mouth Haynes Roadster. And it has an inlet down there for the oil cooler if you wanted one. And I'm still debating that. I'm going to do some test work before I decide on whether or not I'm going to do that. Equinox is actually who makes the bodywork in the UK. And I believe you can buy it directly from them too. I've spoken with them. Good guys. So there it is though. The bonnet and anything aluminum I built from scratch and used some different materials, 3000 and 6000 series for the floor pan and the side paneling along the tunnel, and then pretty much 3000 for the bodywork in different thicknesses and such, but you guys don't really care about that. But there it is, all buttoned up, and I plan to have a tonneau cover made that'll cover this area that will be black with a white piping just to bring out the houndstooth. And that'll cover that entire area with some quick snaps like the factory Miata tonneau covers use. And eventually, in the near future, the plan is to make it all British Racing Green, except for the carbon, and then get some carbon fiber guards for the rear wings, just to tie in the front. So that'll be all green. I'm not a big fan of the aluminum. I know a lot of people are, that's fine, but it's my car. So, but there it is. The next plan for it is to drive it. I'm in Colorado, so a little snow here. And then once the snow breaks, I'm planning on driving it. And the BMW Car Club here has a great autocross series that allows other makes. So I'll be registering in that just because I get a lot more seat time, a lot more runs than like SCCA or one of the other sanctioning bodies here. So that's the plan, is to autocross it and sort it on the autocross track. Once it's sorted, track days. Again, I'm going to build a cage, I think, so that the car's a little safer on the track, but don't feel the need for that on an autocross course. So cage will be in the future as well. I do have to use a clip wiper to get it past registration, but I'm going to see how it goes. I don't anticipate driving this in the rain very often, so I don't think I'm going to add the weight of wipers. However, I wired the switch and bought a billet switch. So one of those 3 buttons on the dash is actually for wipers. The other's for brights and the other's for horn. So there it is. Really, really excited about it. Can't wait to take it to some events and maybe some cars and coffee events and drives. And I've got a couple of folks here that have 7s as well, so maybe some mountain drives. So it's a tribute. I've had people ask, what is it? It's a 7 is always my answer. But it is a tribute to Colin Chapman and the 7. So, you know, it's not supposed to be exactly a replica or anything like that. It's just a tribute car. So it has no commonality other than maybe the lighting with a Caterham or a Lotus 7, but certainly looks like one. And that was the idea.
Hi, my name is Al. I'm here to talk to you about some of the tips and tricks that I've learned over the last 20 years planning, building, and finishing my Lotus 7. It's been a long process, but I'm so glad that I did it. I've been involved in some of the forums, but haven't made a whole lot of posts. If you've seen any of them, it would have been done under the name of Gunner1. My profession had nothing to do with building cars. I got all my information from forums, from the internet, from books, and a welding course I took at a community college. So today we're going to show you some tips and tricks that I learned along the way that made the job a whole lot easier. And here it is, proof of life. That is a McSorley 2+2+2 frame, as opposed to a book frame, as opposed to a McSorley 422. The difference is this is only 2 inches wider, 2 inches higher, and 2 inches longer. We basically changed things around. Jim did some special plans for me, and we took some room out of here, and we added it into elongated scuttle and foot area, which draws your feet further out of that tunnel and gives you a little more room on either side of your pedal because the whole thing is wedge shaped. Point of this is that if you've got a new frame or you're building your frame, take into consideration aspects like foot room, ground clearance, clearance for your motor. Make sure there's enough room for your differential. And don't be afraid to do up a build table, and even if you got a frame, change it around because you're going to put a lot of work into this car and you want to start with something that you're going to be happy with when you're finished. Moving on to forming aluminum panels. This body was made from a combination of 3003 and 5052 aluminum. The hood, the scuttle, and the back apron were made by 050 aluminum. The side pieces I made with 063. The floors I made out of 0.10 aluminum, and that was 5052. Aluminum floors are a really good idea. They weigh about 1/4 that of steel. Give you an example, a 4x8 sheet of steel, 16 gauge, is 80 pounds. The same sheet in 16 gauge aluminum is 28 pounds. So it makes sense to stick with the aluminum. When you're doing your aluminum panels, you'll see that they're pretty darn large. I like to use what I call my CAD design program. That's actually cardboard aided design. Now for these panels, the best tip I can give you is make them up using tar paper. They're huge sheets of paper. You don't have to glue a bunch of sheets together, and it actually folds very much like aluminum. Concerning the floor, I made mine out of aluminum, and I made it in one piece. The reason I did that is just my concern over the structure of the frame. There's just not a whole lot down the center of the frame to keep it going from side to side. There's a lot of triangulation in the frame, but if you look down towards the floor, it's a box. It's not triangulated. So I made mine out of one piece and made it out of aluminum. Now, some tips and tricks about doing this. Bonding steel to aluminum involves a lot of process. It involves taking the scale off the aluminum where you're going to be bonding, roughing it up with a flap disc, and you've got to use one flap disc for the steel frame and one flap disc for the aluminum. You just can't mix the two. Make sure they're both clean with alcohol. Now, I used aircraft structural adhesive as well as cherry rivets, 1/8 cherry rivets, holding the whole thing together. We use cherry rivets because when you pop them, the pin stays in them and seals everything with water. It also makes them a lot stronger. All this is available from aircraft spruce. When you're clamping the floor to the steel frame, use lots of clamps, but don't make them tight enough to squeeze all of the epoxy out between the aluminum and the steel. It's a bit of a sweet spot you've got to find. Also, when you're dealing with structural adhesive like 6228 aeropoxy, you've got to do this in around 70 degrees. So a cold garage isn't a good idea. The 6228 epoxy, aeropoxy, is amazing stuff. Aluminum to aluminum, it has tensile lap shear strength of 3,480 psi, a tensile strength of 9,500 psi, and a compressive strength of 12,000 psi. So you're just adding a lot of structure and stability to your frame. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the hood louvers. You'll notice when I did my hood, it's got quite a curve to it. As well, it's got a bit of a crown to it. That could be problematic when you're trying to punch in louvers because it puts dents everywhere. My solution was to buy pre-made louvers in the same gauge as my hood was made of, which is 0.050. Then I made a backing plate and epoxied that and flush riveted it with solid rivets to the bottom of the hood. Then I took my louver plate and just gently bent it into a curve by hand and dropped it into the plate, and again riveted it with solid countersunk aircraft rivets and aeropoxy 6228. Now, as you can see, I was worried about cracking, but as you can see, it hasn't. Best tip I can give you is make your seams, make your fit as tight as possible. This has been about 2 years, and again, no damage to the paint. Now I'd like to talk about adjustable suspensions. The front suspension I purchased from Speedway Motors, and you can see this piece here will fit various ball joints that can screw in. This one is actually a Dodge one that actually goes into a Mustang 2 suspension nicely. And then back here there's Heim joints. This rod here has a right-hand thread on one side and a left-hand thread on the other, and you can actually turn them so that the suspension opens up or compresses. just by doing both this and this control arm, you can control your caster and your camber. The bottom control arm is fixed. The other alternative, well, I wouldn't do this on the front suspension, but on the back suspension, if you don't want to put right and left hand threads into your control arms, you can actually cut jack shafts or jack adjusters in. Should be a picture up on the monitor. Basically what you're doing is you're cutting your control arms for your 5-link suspension and your panhard rod, just cutting a piece out of them and substituting the jack shaft, threading one jack shaft, right hand thread, the other side left hand thread, and the jack shaft, and putting a jam nut on. And just by turning the jack adjuster, you can increase or decrease the length of your suspension piece. Just going back to the front, because it's just easier to explain. When you're doing these, I always make them out of DOM, 1-inch DOM, which you can buy in various wall thicknesses. These are actually 1/16, and I've plug welded slugs in that are threaded, left and right hand thread. If you want to make it really super easy, you can go up to a quarter wall or whatever size you need that your threaded joint is, and you can actually just tap directly into it. Very simple way to make up these pieces. By doing quarter wall, you're adding a little bit of weight to the whole project, though. Now, in terms of making cable ends up, I've got an emergency brake in here that's hooked up to my Mustang 2 6 3/4 rear end, and there's a couple of cables that go back there. And getting a heavy stainless steel cable of the right length is sometimes a real problem. Should be posting a picture of a way to put the cable ends onto your stainless steel cable. Basically cutting the old ends off, taking a couple of pieces of 1/2-inch aluminum and clamping them together. Drill a hole of the diameter of your cable end that you need almost through to the other side. Then drill a hole in the joint between the two pieces of aluminum about the diameter of your cable and insert the cable. You might want to fray the end of the cable so they splay a little bit into the hole that you've drilled, so that when you try and pull it out, it's just difficult to do. When done, grab an old lug nut or lug wrench and put some silver solder into it. You can get that at Canadian Tire or Princess Auto or pretty much anywhere, any plumbing place. And take your propane torch and melt it. When you're done, when it's all melted, you just pour this silver solder into the top of your mold and let it harden. The pictures that I'm showing you, I've already taken the clamp off holding the two pieces of the mold together, but you can see where the wire goes in and where the silver solder is added. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about making up your trunk lid. There's various ways to do this. Some people have made them out of stainless steel, some have formed aluminum pieces, some have put vinyl tops with poppers on them. What I did was I made mine out of 1/8 ABS sheets. What I found was that you can, actually a friend of mine, Peter, showed me this, was that you can take these sheets And you can bend them simply by heating with a heat gun. Once you've heated a specific area, in this case, you'd put something along the top, like a piece of wood, you'd heat it, and you take another piece of wood in your hand and you'd push this down to where you want it. And as it cools, it hardens in that position. Same with this, you can actually just work your way around with a piece of wood, put a piece on top, and then just push it down. Like I'd cut a piece of wood that covered that shape, and then I would just heat the corner up and I would just push it down. And just hold it and let it cool, hold it and let it cool, hold it and let it cool. And you can get all sorts of shapes out of it. You can use standard ABS glue to hold some of the panels together. Like for example, you'll see a piece down here that stops the lid from falling through. That's bonded on. You can either use ABS glue, or you can actually make a bunch of shavings of this ABS and mix it in with some acetone. And once it all melts, it makes a pretty darn good glue. You can also make the interior of your trunk out of it also. Another tip I'd like to show you, it's a real simple one. Sometimes we have to tow our cars, but there's nowhere to hang on a tow hook. Well, these lifting eyes, one that I got from Amazon, just screws right onto the end of an elongated bolt for my suspension. I've got one on either side. Strong as houses, more than enough to lift the car right off the ground. As for the rear hooks, they're just welded onto the frame. I don't know if I can show you. There it is. And it's just something to pull back. You can actually bolt those onto your frame, just a couple of eyes like that. Another thing to show you is my rear bumper. It's very light. It's a big piece of aluminum, or a piece of aluminum tube that slips into these. Basically, they're little like mini trailer receivers that I made up. Just square tube with the next size square tube welded on top of it, and a bolt slid through them. The reason I did that is that I can pull that out and I can put a spare tire rack onto the back. Or you can always pull the bumper right off and just put a chain through one of the bolts and tow your car backwards if you want. Another idea, some of you have already thought of it, but a brake light. We're very low to the ground and it's always best to be seen. These LED brake lights are available pretty much anywhere. Again, Amazon's a good way to do it. These are simply round LEDs into some aluminum tube, and the wire runs down inside the roll bar into the trunk and hooked into the rear taillight system, rear brake system. And here's one I'm particularly proud of. For a heat shield on your muffler. This was my old crappy snow shovel, which I drilled holes in and used that for my heat shield. Just an idea, when your muffler's this close to your paint, you can often get some header shield. Good idea to wrap your muffler in that so you don't bubble your paint. That muffler is actually off a Yamaha R1. In front of it is a flexible joint because there's some movement in the motor and you just don't want to fatigue that exhaust pipe or your exhaust mounts any more than you have to. Well, that concludes our tips and tricks for building your Lotus 7. Thanks for staying with us. If you got any questions or you want to see something expanded on that I looked at here, please let us know and we'll try and help you out. Good luck on building your 7. It is really worthwhile completing, and there's nothing like driving your own car on the road.
Hi, my name's Steve Dunbar, and I'm addicted to Lotus Super 7s, or more so, Locost Super 7s. And this is a quick little introduction to my build. My inspiration was the book, as it is commonly called, Ron Champion's book, How to Build Your Own Sports Car, for as little as £250. Yeah, right. Okay. But great inspiration. I got my idea from that to start building my own car. And then, of course, I came across the McSorley plans online, which were free download. So that was certainly a big help. And I keep a nice big copy on my workshop garage door for inspiration. It keeps me going. Working in a very, very small shop as I am, it's been a bit of a challenge. But you work with what you've got. I've managed to squeeze in everything that I've needed so far. My welder I've got on a gantry that can slide up and down the shop. So is my compressed air line. The compressor's outside. I've managed to score a little air conditioning unit to keep it comfortable, but that's all by the by. So my build to date is using an Alfa Romeo 2-liter Spider Donor, 1982, and I've always loved Alfa Romeo, and I've also obviously loved Super 7s. So why not combine the two together? The Alpha has created a little bit of a problem. It's a taller motor, or quite tall, but I've managed to get that to fit in quite nicely using fabricated engine mounts, plus the actual mounts themselves are from a 37 Ford flathead V8 that are nice and compact and fitted quite nicely to keep my engine quite low between the scuttle, which is a nose cone. They are from Kinetics in the States. I got all my fiberglass components from them, as is the roll cage. This is obviously my logo that I had made up. I'm quite proud of that. I just hope I don't have anybody from Alpha come in and kick in my butt. The challenges I had as far as the build is concerned, there were some changes that I had to make once I found that the clutch slave cylinder and actually clutch slave cylinder was interfering with one of the bottom rails, but that was easily fixed. The front suspension was really quite a complicated affair, as I used the Alpha spindles, and the Alpha originally comes with a steering box, and on the Super 7 you use a rack and pinion, of course. And I had a friend donate a rack and pinion from a Spitfire, and Ed Leach, thank you for that, Ed, modified the rack and pinion, and everything seems to be doing what it's supposed to do. I've got plenty of travel on the suspension. I'll never need that much. If I do, I'll go rally crossing, I guess. How it's going to work, we'll only find out in probably a year's time where to get everything finally finished. But that was a challenge. The back axle obviously is also a modified Alfa Romeo, The reason why I went with Alpha, because I wanted matched parts all around, and I wasn't prepared to start trying to match gear ratios and things that would work with each other, knowing that the back axle, the transmission, and the motor would all work because they're all from the same donor. The engine, the gas tank is a Jazz tank, which I got from the States. That obviously I haven't run it yet because nothing's working. I've got the brackets at the back for a fuel pump, and the fuel pump, I'll only put that on once I know whether I'm going to go run a fuel pump to accommodate carburetors or fuel injection, hoping it will be fuel injection. This is the manifold that I'm hoping to use, which is from a speaker mechanical injection that came with the earlier Alphas. And the one that I have on the car right now was the Bosch J-Tronic electronic fuel injection system. If worst comes to worst, I'll try and modify this to take Weber's. But the original J-Tronic had a huge plenum over the engine and pipes and vacuum hoses and all of that. Ran well, but not very attractive. So my idea was to see if I could convert a mechanical fuel injector manifold over to electronic fuel injector. These are the mechanical injectors here, and that's one that I found from a Honda that looked like they would work. Unfortunately, these are direct to head or combustion chamber injectors, and they require extremely high pressure and a high impedance, a high voltage to run them. So, and that won't work. So I'm still looking for injectors that will look similar to that, but fit into the head, which I will modify, the manifold, which I will modify to take electronic fuel injectors, and then use a Mega Squirt or a Speeduino or one of the control units that will power the injectors, and obviously an ignition system as well to keep it nice and compact. I had these made up in case I needed to go to carburetors. These were water jet cut out of aluminum, and they fit the flanges of a Weber carburetor if I need to use those. I have started working on the exhaust system. I'm not using a fancy extractor manifold. I'm just using the standard one at the moment, mainly because I just want to get things running. And once I get things running, then I'm going to play around with whatever I want to with modifications. But I started to make a flange to fit the original manifold. So I started off with your typical cardboard cutouts taken from the old exhaust system, beat those out, transferred that to a chunk of steel, and then with the poor man's milling machine, which is a hacksaw and files and a drill press, ended up by making a new flange, which will accommodate the exhaust eventually. This is my grill. Again, a friend of mine used my design, which is the Alpha 7, and cut it out in the water jet out of 1/8 aluminum stainless steel, which is really quite, I'm very, very happy about that. And that's still got to be mounted and fitted, etc., but much further down the road. Here you can see the front brakes, back brakes, and the clutch master cylinders. There's a debate whether I should have gone to floor mounted or overhead mounted. I went overhead mounted because I wanted to keep the floor space clear. Whether that's the right way or not, well, one really doesn't know. We can't really see. Oh, yeah, you can just see the pedals in there. So everything is pretty tight, and I thought that keeping the pedals up in the air would be better. But it did create other little problems. I mean, everything is a problem when, you're not sure what you're doing, and I'm not. But I've made the cover over the actual master cylinders to keep them clear. The actual reservoirs will be mounted remotely, as I've got the steering column will come down here and get in the way a little bit, so I'll have those mounted remotely. But again, working in a small workshop does pose a lot of problems, but hey, you use what you've got. My welder's on a gantry which can slide up and down. I managed to get a hoist made up. I found a bunch of scrap steel, and fortunately I've got my engine hoist in there, which really is helpful. And by pulling it out, I have to put it onto a little dolly and then slide it around. So it's just up and over and down. So basically, at this point, I think I'm pretty well done. The roll bar is kinetics. Welded that up. They did a great job in getting it sized for me. Bodywork, I've got most of the bodywork done. You might see that my taillights are fitted to the back panel and not on the fenders. That's not a deal breaker. I could move those anytime I wanted to or want to, but at this particular point, I mounted them there just because. Stabilizer bar at the back. Yeah, so there we go, lads. That's it for now, and welcome to my shop. Cheers.
Okay, so here I'm just talking about storing things in the frame while we break stuff. I've got old Mazda RX-8 seats that I'm not using, and then I'm going to end up actually making my own seats. I've made a plug to carbonize. So you'll see in a second the various stages that my plug went through. And right there, I'm talking about how I'm way wider than a 14.5-inch seat opening. So my plug mold will come in here with a little bit of foam and Bondo. And it took me a lot of time. And I don't feel bad that it has probably going to need changing. I don't remember what I said in this little section, but it's mostly saying that even when things break, it's fine to start over. And I'm doing a lot of saving, a lot of starting over of things because I'm in the beginning stages. And as we can see in Al's video, getting started on the right foot, and I put that comment, is going to be just as important as finishing, because if things are out of whack or misaligned when you start, they're going to still be misaligned or out of whack when you finish. And, you know, you can see my jokes about myself and my process are alive and well in all things that we do. Being a middle school band director, I have to make a lot of concessions for the brain speed and attention span of gnats that I work with. I'm going to have to move some of the tubes still in the rear end, especially in my hoop. I'm going to support them probably in the same location that Al's and Steve's have gone more towards the back and upper support, probably not to the rear subframe mounts, which is another idea that I got from a guy that I met on 7-Spot to mount everything as I hang the rear subframe. I'm using a complete Miata rear subframe, sort of with the Voodoo plans that we'll talk about probably after we go off the live part of this. And, you know, you can see in the background that there are many, many parts that I still have decisions to make about. I've got 2 sets of headers that I have to decide about. One I'm really going to use for configuration. The other one I'm probably going to use for the actual build. I've switched to a Miata steering rack that I may or may not have to shorten, but after watching MK's video this morning, it's entirely possible that I will purchase parts from them. And then Jim is working to save the things that have gone wrong, and it's all fine. So over here, you can see the size of a stock RX-8 rear seat in my frame, which is a 442 frame. So it's 19 inches inside from outer frame rail to transmission tunnel rail. And Steve and Al and I had talked about this previously when we were doing an earlier hangout with Jim. And so now I'm not sure if we're all frozen again or whatever. But yeah, so we're a little bit stuck with the broadcast, and I see that we may or may not be frozen, and maybe Jim had to leave and come back, and it's all fine. So my part of this was very much shorter than the other guys, obviously, because I'm not nearly as prepared. I don't have as many things put together. I have a K24A on the engine stand over there that I have just checked out the bottom end to make sure everything was working. I put a K20 oil pump on it, so I clearanced that, and that's documented in my channel because I'm trying to document things, although it's so slow. This is not I don't think it's a great project to document the whole job, because as we can see, some people take 2 years to build from a kit and some people take 20 years to build from scratch. But I think that the process is worth it for everybody who gets involved. You know, none of us are experts at this. You know, we're all probably relatively experts at something else. And that's where we have to be happy. You know, I'm perfectly happy just getting kids to learn how to learn. And they reveal things to me as I go through class. Oh, you know, I didn't think about this. And now that I've seen Steve's welder gantry, I'm going to have to go and find some tubing at Tractor Supply and maybe hang mine, because some things take up too much room. And, you know, it's just part of the process. So in a minute, we'll just slide back up in the comments and start discussing all of the things that we've got starred. So, and I'll unmute everybody and we'll just keep going. Most of these questions we've shown in the stream, and So everybody's unmuted now, and we'll just go back and I'll just grab some of these questions and we can just talk about it. So we showed we asked, or Jim asked, who's building a Haynes Roadster. And I think most of the responses were that we're going to either be 442 and I think, so Richard says he's going to be doing a 442. So mine's a 442 and Al's, yours is 222.
Yep.
As you said in your video. So maybe you want to just reiterate, it's been 40 minutes since we heard that info. How was yours done in collaboration with Jim McSorley?
Well, I met Jim McSorley on a forum, and this is back in probably around 2004. And we started talking about frames, and he had done his 442, and I wanted something a little bit smaller, and I wanted to use a book nose. So he asked my spec, and I told him I wanted to do Zetec T5 transmission, Zetec motor, T5 transmission, Ford rear end, Mustang 2 suspension. He said that he would, and I wanted room for my feet, and he said that he would AutoCAD me a frame and send me the plans if I bought the parts, and sent him all of the measurements, which I did. And we went back and forth for about a year. It was a lot of fun, just getting all the pieces just right. And he finally came up with the 2+2 design, he knows, and it worked out really, really well. The seats, the Mazda seats, believe it or not, if you squeeze them up a little bit, will go into a 222. But we also narrowed the transmission tunnel, the 3/4 inch square tube in the transmission tunnel, to just get a little bit more room for the seats in there. The seats I've got in mine are from a Porsche 914. They're Corbeaus out of a 914, but 914 seats will just drop in nicely. So I'm quite happy with the 2+2+2.
And you find that the way you did I know you talked a lot about your floors. Do you find that provides the difference in going to 3/4 tubing in the transmission tunnel?
Well, there is 3/4 inch, the same 3/4 inch tubing in the transmission tunnel. We just made it a little bit narrower. I was more concerned about the whole design. Everything in the car is triangulated with tubes, but if you look down on the floor, there's no triangulation in there, which I'm just afraid I don't know, I'm not an engineer, but I was afraid it'd go like this a little bit, or like that, like squares do instead of triangles. And I looked at putting 2 different floors into it, and it just didn't look real weak. Looked like it'd be stronger if I put a big flat 1-piece floor in it, which I did. And who knows when we build these things, right? It's just my thinking at the time.
Yeah, I mean, there are multiple documentations of guys having the Caterham flat floors installed and then immediately, feeling a difference. I don't know if anybody's going to feel a difference unless you're trying to push it, but I'm sure that it's something that we should all consider. And so I have just some general questions that maybe the other guys here would as well. So Dave Edwards says he's going to be doing a standard book size Locost. So that would suit the nose that you were using very well, because you're just using the standard nose. And then Steve, you got your nose from
Kinetics, yeah.
So did you get the standard nose or the wide one?
The wide mouth nose, yes. And in my case, I went with the 442 mainly because of the width of the back axle of the Alfa Romeo. So everything hinged around the back axle. I wasn't planning on going to a different back axle from a Ford or a Miata or anything else. As I pointed out in my little segment, I wanted to keep everything matched. Engine, gearbox, back axle, and I knew I wouldn't have any problems with the drive system. But matching the chassis to fit the back axle, I made it as wide as possible to fit. The nose cone, I got the wide mouth, and it fitted my chassis absolutely perfectly. I don't know if you saw in the video. I could show again because I am in my shop, but not that really matters. The nose cone fitted quite nicely. I mean, still tons of work to be done on it, the car, but yeah, my basic design was around alpha components, including the spindles, etc.
So what's your track width, Steve? Do you know?
Oh, 42 inches, I believe.
That's your frame outside dimension?
Yeah, frame and the track width from center to center. I'd have to measure that. I'm not really sure right off the top of my head.
No,
Unlike,
it's fine.
I basically, I noticed the one fella's, I think it was Al, his wheels, looks like he's got positive offset wheels on his car. And that's what I'm looking at in order to increase my track width. I'm also thinking of putting in spacers on the back axle to increase my width a little. That's why I don't have fenders on the car yet, mainly because I haven't decided on wheels. And I'm trying to, I don't want to go to very, very wide wheels. So 6 inches as wide as I want to go. And I'd like them to be positive offset. In other words, to the outside of the car, not to the inside, because I literally have no space. Just using the standard alpha wheels, which are 5-inch width, get me fairly close to the bodywork, and I'd like that a little bit further apart. So
Yeah,
positive offset is what I'm looking for.
So just one thing, when we did the frame, I made sure that I bought the differential, which is a Ford 6 3/4, and my wheels and my tires. And then we sized from that. And the critical point was the 4-bar link pieces, making sure they were mounted correctly for the right amount of spacing. But and differential before we
Right. As far as that's concerned, I made up my own brackets to fit and welded them to the differential to fit the chassis.
Yeah,
so
perfect.
Yeah, and that seems to work. Lined up quite nicely, including the panhard rod fits in comfortably. A lot of the stuff that I've built, I haven't used too many ideas from other people. I've gone with my own gut feeling, what I think would work, taking cues from others in some cases, but just going along liking what doing what I like to do. So it's a little bit flying by the seat of my pants. I've incorporated a couple. For instance, I noticed your gauges, Al, and I've also got Speed Hut gauges, which I like very much, customized to what I wanted. On my controls for my lights and indicators, I managed to get a Kabuto tractor switch, which was really quite a nice little compact unit. It included the high beams, low beams, indicators left and right, and a horn button in one nice little compact unit. My wiring, I'm going to have the engine components separate from the internal lights and indicators, etc. So I'll have 2 different wiring harnesses for the car. And as I pointed out in my little segment, I don't have a control unit for my injection system or ignition system yet, because I'm hoping to use something like a Mega Squirt or MSD or somebody, MSD, yeah.
Just going back to the gauges, I found the best deal out there for my gauges were Dolphin gauges.
Okay.
And that worked out really well in that you can buy them in metric too for us Canadians, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, they all call in metric.
Yeah, Speed Huts have the option of going to metric or imperial. And I went for that. My friend Ed Leach, who's built a number of very, very, very nice cars, used those and recommended them from the fact that the speedometer is GPS controlled.
Yeah,
which
I
is
like
great.
that too. Yeah.
Okay, so let's, since we all have different ideas, I'm using currently a Miata full rear subframe, which should, according to Dave Hempy from Locost USA, at full bump and drew, clear the factory 5.5 inch 185/60 tire from a 442 frame. So the outside dimension of my frame is 46 inches.
Okay.
these are the questions that everybody I think is the most worried about is if I go over a bump, how much are my tires going to rub? So if you went with a standard book frame, I had a Mustang 8.8 rear end in it when I got the car, and there was about 2 inches of clearance to the tire, and that was on the ginormous 17x9 Mustang GT wheels.
Wow.
So I think maybe we can get through this for some guys. So there's a consideration. I think Russ maybe is looking at maybe using like the 8.8 independent rear out of a Ford Explorer. I don't know the exact track width, but I know that it has to be wider than a Miata. So what I would do, and this is, I mean, I've spent a million hours just searching blah 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 track width. So I know that my Miata is like 59. I'm looking at it right now, of course, because I wasn't prepared. So the Miata rear track width is like 58 or 59. The Explorer rear track width is 66. So that, to me, that means almost infinite options. However,
Yeah.
then you might have to look at wider fenders,
Mhm.
or you could use a higher, you could use more like a negative offset wheel to bring the outer wheel surface in. And then you're only worried about clearing the calipers, depending on the knuckles that you use. These were the questions that I was asking on the formula. I don't know if you guys went through this same process, because at the pull apart near me, there is an Explorer with the locking 8.8, like it has all the right things. Yeah. Okay. And Russ is posting here, and Jim caught that. The Ford IRS has a considerably more offset. I don't know to what side. Russ, maybe you can put that in the comments. But I went with the Miata one because it's narrower.
Now, what about just shortening up the CV axles and either resplining them or just putting a sleeve on them and welding them up?
Yeah, I think that seems to be the best option, as it looks like. And a 7.5 Mustang rear end has 61-inch track width. So that's that would have given me a little more room, but I wanted to do IRS and I wanted to use stock axles, Miata axles, but because they're mine are the 28 spline, the newer ones fit in the 31 spline, in IRS diffs.
Just looking at the comment we've got there, we've got a fellow running a Mustang 7.5 with a track width of 61 inches. Depends which Mustang you're talking about. If you're talking about the Fox body, I think those are the wider ones. But if you go back to the Mustang 2, I think you're talking probably more 57 to 59 inch. The other thing just to point out, 7.5 I think weighs about 140 pounds. If you're happy enough without an LSD, you can go to a 6 3/4, and I think they weigh in at about 110 pounds. So it's a fair bit lighter.
Yeah, my whole rear subframe is 190 pounds. It's only 10 pounds lighter than the 8.8 with all the stuff on it. So I didn't save a lot of weight, but I need to save the weight in myself. It's just easier for me to not get fat. Or get less fat. It'd be easier for me.
Well, it's the unsprung weight you want to worry about.
Yeah, that's what I'll keep telling myself, as long as I'm not the wheel. All right, so let me go. All right, Richard asked also about did anybody bead roll their floors? Is anybody considering that? And does anybody know, can use 18 gauge and bead roll it and it functions like 16? I don't know all those numbers.
I was thinking about that doing mine, but what I was worried about was because I was epoxying mine, air epoxying mine to the floor, I wanted to make sure that it was dead flat. And I thought it was just easier to go to 0.10 rather than 0.063, for example, and then trying to bead roller it. I don't know. Yeah. But if unless it's perfectly flat, you're going to have a hard time. You're going to have to put too much pressure to flatten it, and that'll squeeze all the epoxy out. Unless you want to just rivet it, you know.
Yeah, the bottom of my car is just flat. I used steel. I didn't go aluminum because I'm not too concerned about weight. I'm not going to be racing the car and interested in super crazy performance. So I just went with mild steel, flat bottom, and a million rivets.
Yeah.
I like rivets. I got a pneumatic rivet gun, so I went crazy.
Well, don't leave home without that one.
Another thing that I'm considering is just adding a small flange with known width, known distance tapped or welded on nuts instead of doing a million rivets, so that it would make possible removal for repair or changing of components easier. I don't know if that's crazy though.
I've never had a need to pull my floor off ever.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a real structural piece. You know, you want that as rigid as possible for the reasons that I mentioned before. There's no triangulation in the floor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely,
And then
I agree. Sorry.
no, go ahead.
Yeah,
Oh, I
no,
see.
I definitely agree. As far as structural stiffness is concerned, that was the only thing that I was went with steel and rivets to keep it a structural member. And I think if the reason why I have to change a floor is probably going to be something catastrophic has happened, the floor needs to be changed. So I think
I was just looking at a comment that fellow was going to put beads longitudinally down before we're too away from his comment, longitudinally down the floor. I think that's really a really good idea if you're going to be using light floor. There it is there. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. One thing too is that if you've got beads in the floor, and for any of the floors, make sure you cut holes in the floor so that you can pull plugs out if you get caught in the rain. The beads will help gutter the water out, but if you don't have something to get rid of the water, you're going to be sitting in a bathtub.
Been there.
Ask me how I know.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, book chassis, but they look the same as what Al was showing. So, yeah, Steve also has the McSorley plan on his wall, right? You have the thing inflated, and Al, I believe Al's car would look like a book chassis, right, Al? I mean,
mine would look like a book chassis, just bumped up 2 inches all the way around.
right, because all the dimensions changed by the same amount.
The differences are subtle in that my scuttle is a little bit longer. That pulled my feet out of the wedge where the clutch and brake and gas pedal are.
So did you take your distance out of the trunk area to help get your feet back? Is that what you were saying? Because you said, since it's 2 extra inches.
Came out of the sitting area. It came out of the distance between where the dashboard is and the back of the seat, and has added to the place where your feet go, starting from your dashboard face to the firewall.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, are you guys running fixed seats or are they on sliders?
Sliders.
Okay.
I used just Triumph Spitfire.
Okay.
Yeah, I got a pair of sliders from Amazon, and they seem to work well. Just obviously on the driver's side, and sliders. Yeah.
Okay, I see we got a question there about tubing. 1.25 tubing with 1 inch diagonal. Not sure what Richard is asking.
So are you saying, Richard, like 1.25 by 1? Because I don't know.
Generally going up on tubing size might be necessary. Necessary if you're going for V8, but 16 gauge square tube is more than adequate.
Yeah.
Okay, so Richard's talking about 1 by 1.25. And I mean, I think for that, as long as you're stacking the molecules in the direction that you need the rigidity, I don't think anybody would complain. And of course, I completely missed what Al said as I was reading, because I can only do half a thing at a time.
Yeah, I basically, I just said I wouldn't upsize my frame. I wouldn't change from 1-inch square to 16 gauge. I think it's more than adequate, particularly if you, well, in my case, particularly seeing as I bonded everything, all the skins onto it. It's rigid as hell. There's not a rattle in the thing.
No, that's nice to know. And Jim has what's yours? A Demon?
Demon Motorsport.
Demon Motorsports?
Yeah, SR7. It's a Busa engine. It's got a T-Bird diff from 2001, 60 inches track width.
Yeah, that T-Bird rear end is popular on some things here. There just aren't enough of them, I think, that are not rusted out somehow. I found one in a Cougar at a pull apart that I was going to use, but then the bolt pattern from those knuckles was I don't know, it was 5 by 5 on 4 3/4 or something. It was a dimension that I didn't want to. It was a dimension I didn't want to deal with for finding front wheels that matched.
Mhm.
And I think that's the only thing that kept me from from going that direction, because I just wanted to be able to buy one set of wheels, and I don't think that I will make I'm not planning to use like a non-square wheel setup, so all the same width.
Yeah.
I know some people are using like 8-inch rear and 6.5-inch front, or 8s and 7s when we go to 15-inch wheels. I don't want to fiddle with that.
Yeah. As it so happens, I got the T-Bird front spindles too.
Oh, right. So what is your bolt pattern, Jim? Do you know your wheels?
A good question. I'd have to go and look at my now 2004 inventory of the vehicle, but it's standard five bolt Ford.
It looks like it's 4 by 108, or it's 5 bolt.
It is.
They're all on 108 mil spacing.
I don't know.
That's just what I saw from a quick search, but I could be also wrong again. Okay, I'm just going to try to scroll through. There was some discussion about engines as well. We were talking about, somebody else is thinking about a similar setup to me. Russ and Richard were kind of on the same page about, Dave asked, does anybody know what theirs actually costs?
We shift back and forth nervously.
Remember, it's on the internet, so it's forever.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, you got to look at the cost, just ballpark the costs. I mean, if you're not going to depending on what you're going to do, if you're going to get somebody to paint your car and do a really nice job of it, you could go upwards to 10 grand on the paint.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So, or even more. I would say into mine, which is like the engine is it's a new Z-Tech. It's rebuilt T5. There's got a race line sump. That sump was $800. So probably 25,000, 30,000 all in, paint and all.
Yeah.
My donor was a $2,000 car. Perfect donor for me because the engine tranny, back axle, and spindles, I'm using all of that. My biggest expense was probably at the moment $800 for a drive shaft to make up a new drive shaft. $800 for the shock absorbers, which were QA1 shocks. The master cylinder and setup from Willwood were, I think, 600. So I'm probably into it for about 10 grand right now.
Well done.
Yeah. I haven't skimped on anything. It's just that I try to make as much as I can myself and look around for various things. When I come to my fuel injection,
There's the winner, Dave
Yeah.
Edwards.
He's going by the book says I can do it for 250. I'm going to do it for 250.
Yeah.
I got a steering rack.
The cost of steel has gone up so much.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
crazy.
It's really expensive now.
And even the carburetors, I mean, for a set of Webbers now, you're looking probably about 1,500 plus.
Yeah.
You know, for
Yeah.
the right
Well, I've
set.
just actually priced Webbers out, and they offer you a pair of Chinese Webbers for $850 a pair, and the actual genuine Spanish-made Webbers are around 850 each.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So once you put in taxes and all of the good stuff, it's going to be quite a bit. $2,000 for the. Yeah.
Just one thing though, there's Webbers and there's Webbers. Like I run a Z-Tech motor, and they're very sensitive to the number of progression holes you've got in the body.
Yeah.
And that's just where that controls your transition from idle right through your acceleration. And Z-Techs require 5 progression holes. No argument,
Okay.
no nothing. You got to order the special set. I actually bought a nice set of Italian Webbers with 3 progression holes. Didn't work worth a damn.
Interesting.
5 progression holes. It's smooth as a baby's bottom.
Uh-huh.
And that cost me, 10 years ago, $1,600 to get those from Webcon. Yeah. And worthwhile doing.
Just for the stuff that I've collected, the frame that I purchased was my biggest expense so far, and I still have to cut it up. So maybe it wasn't the smartest thing, but it was close enough that I could go look at it, come home, and decide that I might as well just be foolish with money and go back and get it again.
Mhm.
And I got wheels with it, and I have a rear end that somebody will want, because somebody's going to want to put a 8.8 out of a Mustang into a Mustang or something for a drag car, and some parts I can sell, but I'm not betting on getting any money back on anything. So I'm about maybe $9,000 in parts and like $2,000 in frustration and redos. So yeah, like speed. Okay, so I'll just post the wrong one. I'm gonna post the Speedway thing because I don't know how much Speedway is popular in Canada, but I know down here in the States, like a lot of, like, you can buy a whole Mustang 2 kit, front, rear axle from Speedway Motors with the screw-in ball joints, right? That you're using. Al, you have those screw-in ball joints?
Yeah.
Or
well, just looking at the comment down there, and the answer is basically, yeah, all that for sure. Mustang 2 spindles, coilovers, they're, and either by fat upper, well, you can buy the upper arms, or you can make them, as I mentioned earlier. But you were mentioning about the ball joints. The upper ball joint is actually, I can't remember the number, but it's the same. It's a Moog part, and it screws right into the Speedway
I think
kit.
They take those. Sorry.
And it's actually for a Dodge. It's actually a Mopar part.
I think it's that 772 ball joint.
That's absolutely correct. The bottom ball joint you use is the one out of a Mustang 2 or a Pinto, and you've got it. There's 2 things to say about that. There's upper ball joints and there's lower ball joints. And you could use an upper ball joint down below, but it's not built for the load. You've got to use a lower ball joint in the lower piece. You've got to do some modification in it to make the pad a little bit smaller, and you've got to drill the damn thing for holes. And just one thing I really learned, and this is a really good tip, drilling a ball joint mounting plate is like, oh my God, you're going to burn through your titanium bits like crazy. The only way I found to drill them, believe it or not, was to use a cheap concrete carbide drill. Put it in your drill press, use lots of water, and it goes through it like butter, honest to God.
Really?
Yep, through the hardest steel you can find.
So you're talking about re-drilling the upper ball joint mount?
Yep. About lower, you take the lower ball joint mount, and it's a bit of an odd looking duct. And you've got to cut it off and re-drill it, put new mounting holes in it. But use a carbide bit for drilling concrete. Just give it a little touch to sharpen it, and wow, it works great.
Yeah, Russ,
Yeah.
I have the same thing. I found a Miata rear diff from a local guy who was moving from a locking one of the Torsen Miata diffs, and he was going to just get an open diff and weld it because he just wanted to use it for drifting, and the Torsen would unlock as he shifted direction. So I got it for cheap, but then if I look on eBay or anything, yeah, the Torsen diffs for the Miata, the NA and NB Miatas are super expensive now. They're all $1,000, and I definitely didn't pay that for mine. Anybody else have a locking rear, or find that it's advantageous for real or not that big a deal because of weight?
Well, standard alpha. I'm just got the limited slip diff standard alpha, so I can't comment on that. So
Single
Yeah.
donor.
yeah,
Yeah.
single donor. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't have a limited
With a bit of
slip on.
Spitfire.
Yeah, I don't have a limited slip on mine, and if I'm doing a wide open throttle in second gear, about 3,000 RPM, one of my tires lights up. So, it'd probably be nice to have, but how often do we do that, right?
Well, apparently Jim says every day.
My neighbors might disagree.
I'm interested in why you chose the R1 can for yours, Al.
It looked right, and an R1 I think runs about 12,000 RPM, and my Z-Tech runs about 6,000 RPM, and similar horsepowers, and I thought it would probably it would be the right combination for it, and it was. The other thing I like about it is it's light, and it's titanium, I think. It's light, and it's got the right sound. It's quiet because it's right by my ear.
Yeah.
Reasonably quiet. And when you take off with it at wide open throttle, when the Webbers open up and that can opens up, it sounds like a motorcycle.
Yeah.
What's not to like,
Yeah. And the flexible connector was brilliant.
That's good idea, that one. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that generation of R1 can. That looks like from the 0103, where it was all the gray tie. I have a pair of the 09 titanium when it was dual underseat cans. I have a pair of them that are on my VMAX that I might just take back off when I sell it, and it would be great to have dual over-under exhaust sitting on this thing. And who knows, maybe I'll cut holes in the back and make it. If I could get enough space to run, like the Caterham has the rear exit exhaust as an option. You just say I want the race exhaust, but they have a lot more clearance between their 6.5-inch wheel and the S3 chassis. So it's a lot of room that I kind of don't have. I don't think I've got enough to get a pipe under there.
Well, it's nice to find something that's cool and quiet, because it can get pretty tedious with a loud exhaust right at your ear, depending on, and not only that, but you really want to maintain some stealth on the road, because when these cars light up, even with that can on it, you turn a lot of heads.
Yes. Especially at 10,000 RPM.
Jim quietly smiling about.
I'm telling you, man, he seems like a quiet guy, but no.
Oh yeah,
he goes out. It wasn't me. Look,
the devil made me do it.
Yeah. Well, the fellow that was building the Caterhams on Vancouver Island at Chemainus, I went for a ride in his Hayabusa, and that thing screams. That screams.
Yeah, that's what sold me on building a 7 until I found out how much they cost, or what
Yeah.
on buying a 7 until I found out what they cost. But I went for the same ride with them, scared the crap out of me. But there's no point in building anything else.
Yeah, well,
nothing's-
David Seville-Peck was an extremely talented driver, and the build quality of his 7s were lovely.
Yes.
Well, I
yeah.
mean, it was a full Caterham kit
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
Hayabusa.
Yeah.
Yeah, he put a lot of
So-
development into that.
He
Yeah,
did.
Oh,
And now we have the ultimate question: what do they actually weigh? I don't know if you guys have weighed yours.
Yep.
They all weigh different. I know that the Caterham's on the stamp says 550K, 550 kilograms, which, for the rest of us is about 1,300 pounds.
Yep.
And mine will never weigh that little. I'm sure it'll be at the 1,600 pound range because I put the weight of just my frame and running gear, and it's whatever I put, 350 kilograms just for that, and that's with no motor. And I know that my motor and trans weighs almost 400 pounds.
Yeah.
So
well, mine is about 1475.
I have no idea what my weight is at this particular point. As I say, I'm still on the stands. I haven't put the car on wheels yet or anything like that, so I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, this is with this is fully dressed with some gas in it and the whole bit. So
I'm feeling guilty.
yours is what, 1150 something, Jim?
1,050.
what?
Yeah, well, his
It's a
whole
bike
motor with
engine.
the thing weighs 200 pounds.
184 pounds with the transmission.
Oy, oy,
Oh.
oy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why he got to go wah every day.
Oh, God.
Plus, and Jim, what size wheels do you have on yours? I was guessing from the pictures, but I don't remember.
They're 14s.
Oh,
Now
so, yeah, those weigh nothing.
Yeah, because my tires are 205 50 15s on 15 by 8s, and that's a real heavy combination of tires. I could easily take 100 pounds off of it just by changing the wheels out.
Yeah.
Well, I weighed these Mustang GT wheels, each wheel and tire, and they're like 235, 45, 17s. That wheel and tire was like 42 pounds, and the Miata 14-inch with 185/60 on a 5.5 by 14 weighs 28 pounds.
Mhm.
Yep.
So 14 pounds a corner of spinning stuff is not, it kind of makes me want to stick with these little Miata pedal wheels and just put skinny tires and go for it.
Well, it depends on what you want. For me, I mean, I'll use it in the track and whatnot, but I wanted something comfortable with no rattles, with that look kind of cool, and the big gunky tires on it look okay.
I
Yours
like a
is a
little
cool
more
looking car.
sidewall on these.
What's that?
I think they look good with a little more sidewall. When I look
Yeah.
at the ones from XCS and they run the 17-inch wheels, but it's still like a 24-inch tire.
Yeah.
It's so low profile.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. If your suspension, I guess, is amazing, it could
Yeah.
be comfortable, but I'd rather use tire. And
Well, now that's another thing on suspension. I went really light on my springs. I think I'm about 275 on the front and 1 pounds per square, or 275s on the front and 175s on the rear. So I got lots of suspension travel, and it's reasonably soft, which I can stiffen up with the GAZ. You can actually stiffen them up a little
Adjust
bit.
them up.
Yeah, but that's the one thing that David Seville-Peck said, because I was also amazed at how smooth his cars went. And he said, whatever you do, build your suspension soft. He said,
Yeah.
build it so that it works properly and it's soft. So you got lots of travel and your wheels will stay on the road. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah.
it's
I think
really
my backs
surprising.
are my backs are 180, and I think the fronts are about 275.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be a bit light, but nope. It
Yeah.
works really good.
The shocks that came on my frame, there were 200s in the back and 150s in the front.
Mhm.
And they're QA1s as well, Steve, with the single, they're just a single knob. Hopefully that'll work, but the Miatas take there's they're canted in a bit at the back, and I would like to do a cantilever in the front, but then I got to get the arm lengths right so I don't have weird rising or falling rate. But that's one thing I really noticed when you watch the Caterham Cup races is how much those guys move around.
Yeah.
We're all worried about tagging the sump on the ground, but and obviously it shouldn't be an issue on the track, but it moves.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one nice thing about the soft suspension. I love watching my front tires go up and down.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole point why I went with, decided to go motorcycle fenders versus a clamshell. I mean, the clamshell, you can't watch your suspension. And
Yeah.
I actually, I can send a bunch of pictures. I actually was going to go clamshells on mine, which is why I did 16 gauge on the side aluminum panels. And I actually made up clamshells and they were all set to go. And I thought, Jesus, if I get this thing over 100 miles an hour, it's going to take off.
Really?
And so, but I still got the clamshells. They're beautiful clamshells and they cost me about $1,000 to make. But,
Yeah, wow.
fiberglass is very expensive.
Yeah.
But if you want, I can send you some pictures of them. It looks like the Batmobile, it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll have to do a follow-up question, Q&A, like pics of all the stuff we talked about.
Epic fails. Yeah.
Yeah, things I should not have done, but were great while I thought about it.
Well, it's actually a good point for future reference. I mean, we talked in general terms about building them, but you know what? We could actually spend a whole session just on suspension.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It would be a time well wasted.
It's my biggest concern, I think. Like, I'm not so worried about making measurements and hanging my rear subframe and moving tubes around, but I really don't want to have bump steer be an issue. And I don't, that is just a thing, I don't work for an auto manufacturer and I don't want to make it up myself. So that's why I'm thinking about getting the ones from Kinetic, either buying the kit from Jack over there, or just buying straight MK parts.
Well,
that would make things a lot easier. I mean, on my front suspension, because I'm using the Alpha spindles and used a fair bit of the Alpha components, and the fact that the Alpha, you swap the left to the right-hand side. You have to literally swap the spindles over from left to right. The geometry was, it took me a long time to work that out. And literally it wasn't through my computer simulations, anything like that, because I'm computer illiterate. I worked out it all by trial and error, and took me 3 complete changeovers to get my front end to get a decent steering angle, some caster camber built in, and travel. So I think I'm okay, but I won't know until I actually drive it. But bump steer is a little bit of a concern.
Well,
but we'll see what.
Bump steer you can't design in until after you've got everything done, because basically there's a line from your top suspension pivot to your bottom, and you run it straight through, and that's exactly where your knuckle needs to be, where it comes out of your steering arm. And it's not that hard to change, because you just get your standard rack and you take it down to the machine shop and you say, I want it shortened, and they'll cut that rack and they'll remachine the end of your end of your steering rack. It's not going to cost you that much. I've got a Chevette one in mine, aluminum Chevette one in mine, and this is many years ago, but I think it cost me about $100. So probably $200 or $300 now max. So
I'm not opposed to redesigning my front end, but my biggest concern now is to get the carburation or the fuel injection system working and getting the engine running. Once I've got the engine running, then it's a case of moving on with everything else. But at the moment, I'm just more interested in getting the motor running, because I'm changing that whole induction system over. So
Yeah.
that's my big concern before I really worry about what it's going to drive like. And I think, as Jim has pointed out on many occasions, it's a journey, and the getting to the end just means you have to start another journey. So
Well, that's the whole
keep it
purpose of our
going.
series here is to keep our focus on that tiny little light at the end of the tunnel and don't give up. You know,
Absolutely.
we talked to Nate yesterday, and his buddy's space frame is hanging on the wall of his shed, and you just don't want to see. I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
Actually, if you don't mind, there's some real quick thing I wanted to show you that my friend Jan showed me. It's a tool, trick and tool. When you're putting your aluminum against your metal, and some people fold it over, some people put it right along the side and rivet it, and then it's a bit of a jagged edge on the top and whatnot. My friend Jan came up with this idea. It's basically just 1 inch hose, heater hose, and it actually, when you clean it up, it actually looks like carbon fiber. And he made up this little tool, and he split it like this, just pushing it right through, just a blade on a stick.
Yeah.
And he split it, and then he just snaps that down underneath his arm on his Locost, and then up along the side, where by your shoulder, and it looks really cool, and it costs like nothing. And I think of the work I did to fold all my stuff, all the way around. Yeah. So anyway, just wanted to share that little tip and give Jan credit for it, because that's
brilliant.
That's going to save you hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
And
it functions as that trim.
Yeah, it just functions as a trim, and if you want, you can always put vinyl over it. But I wouldn't. I just clean it because it looks like carbon fiber once you put some cleaner on it. Yeah. Anyway,
There you go.
Nice and soft.
So what do you say, guys? Have we got more to discuss on the topic for today, or shall we put a wrap on it for today and come back with more plotting and scheming for the next go round?
Well,
I think that's a good idea, Joe.
I could talk forever, but my phone is telling me otherwise. I'm getting
That's what I was going to say. We could talk forever, but our phones can't. We've had enough technical embarrassments today.
Well, I'm sitting in a workshop at -6 at the moment.
Oh, geez. Forgot we sent Steve to the shed.
Cruel and unusual punishment for a guy from South Africa.
Right.
Well, what can I say? No, I just decided to do it in the shed because there's always a commotion inside the house. So this works out nicely for me. And I'm starting to run out of power as well, gentlemen. So, Jim, once again, thank you for hosting all of the getting us all together. And I really look forward to chatting with the lads again later, and hopefully showing some decent updates on what I've managed to achieve in the next, hopefully, a little while.
Okay, let me just say this. Dave, thank you for stepping in and taking the controls when everything went dark at my end.
Hey, lucky it was my part of the video. I knew what I said.
I don't know what happened to the sound on yours. It just like disappeared. And Steve,
the track came. It's so weird. It doesn't matter.
Steve, thank you so very much. And one and all who joined us today, thank you so much. And we will be back in touch. And as we say always, we will see you at 7 Spot.
Cheers, Jim.
Bye, guys.
Cheers.
Al, everybody, take care, lads. Bye-bye.
Yep.